Jules Vaughn is a character whose psychology is shaped by a constant battle between wanting to be loved and wanting to stay free, and nowhere is this struggle clearer than in her relationship with Rue Bennett. To understand Jules, you have to look at how deeply she fears losing herself inside someone else's chaos, especially someone she cares about as much as she cares about Rue. Jules enters Rue's life as a bright, expressive, curious person who is always looking for connection. But what makes her complicated is that connection often scares her just as much as it excites her. She is drawn to intensity, and Rue brings that intensity instantly. But Jules quickly realizes that Rue's intensity comes from addiction. And that addiction carries a weight that Jules is not sure she can hold. Psychology often talks about two opposite ways people relate in close relationships: autonomy, which is the need to be independent and maintain your own identity, and fusion, which is when boundaries blur and one person feels swallowed or overwhelmed by the other. Jules leans strongly toward autonomy because her life has taught her that she needs independence to survive emotionally. She has had to learn to define herself, to build herself, and to protect the parts of her identity that feel fragile. So when Rue begins to rely on her emotionally in a way that feels heavy, Jules feels that familiar fear rise inside her. The fear that she will disappear into someone else's needs, someone else's dependence, someone else's crisis. That fear becomes the center of their relationship, and it explains why Jules runs, pulls away, and sometimes seems confused about what she wants. At first, when Jules and Rue connect, it feels safe and exciting for both of them. Rue sees Jules as someone who makes her feel alive again, someone who gives her hope, and someone she can attach herself to because the world feels too dark without that attachment. Jules, on the other hand, sees Rue as someone who genuinely cares for her, someone who does not judge her, someone who treats her with gentleness. But the imbalance grows quickly. Jules wants connection, but she also wants room to breathe, room to explore, room to discover herself. Rue, struggling with addiction and emotional instability, starts leaning on Jules for comfort, for escape, for survival. Jules senses this shift immediately. She feels Rue's weight, emotionally and psychologically, and it scares her because it feels like Rue's entire stability is resting on her shoulders. In the psychology of relationships, this is the moment when autonomy becomes threatened. Jules does not want to become a replacement for drugs. She does not want to be the reason Rue stays sober or relapses. She does not want to be that responsible for someone else's life, especially when she is still trying to figure out her own. This is where the fear of fusion comes in. Jules worries that if she lets Rue cling too tightly, she will get pulled into Rue's addiction, not through drugs but through dependence. She worries that she will stop being Jules and start becoming whatever Rue needs her to be, and that is the kind of emotional fusion that can feel suffocating. Another important part of Jules' psychology is a need to reinvent herself. She expresses herself through fashion, through makeup, through exploring her identity, through being around people who make her feel like she can be something new. She thrives on movement and discovery. But Rue's addiction freezes everything around her. Addiction creates a kind of emotional stillness, a heaviness that slows life down and makes it repetitive, predictable, and draining. When Jules feels Rue's addiction pulling her into that slow, heavy world, she feels trapped. She feels like she is being dragged into someone else's darkness when what she wants is light and change and freedom. She cares for Rue, but she cannot ignore the reality that Rue's addiction changes the entire dynamic of their relationship. Instead of being a partner, Jules feels like a caretaker. Instead of being part of a shared connection, it feels like she is carrying all of it alone. And that imbalance pushes her further into her fear that she will disappear inside Rue's emotional needs. As Jules becomes more aware of Rue's dependence on her, she experiences guilt, confusion, and responsibility all at once. Part of her wants to help Rue, to be the person Rue can rely on. Another part of her wants to run, to protect herself before Rue's addiction hurts her the way it has hurt Rue's family and friends. Jules grew up dealing with her own emotional wounds, and she knows what it feels like to be overwhelmed by someone else's problems. She knows what it feels like when your boundaries are crossed or ignored. So when Rue starts relying on her too much, Jules feels those past fears waking up inside her. She does not want to repeat cycles of emotional drowning. She does not want to be the person who tries to save someone but ends up losing herself. So she distances herself, not because she does not love Rue, but because she feels that closeness with Rue is turning into a responsibility she cannot manage. And this creates the heartbreaking tension between them. Rue interprets Jules pulling away as abandonment, while Jules sees it as self-protection. The fear of being consumed by Rue's addiction becomes even clearer when Jules feels pressured to stay sober for Rue. Rue makes Jules the center of her emotional universe. And while that might sound romantic to some people, for Jules it feels suffocating. It feels unfair. It feels like something she did not agree to carry. She wants boundaries, but Rue struggles to understand boundaries because addiction makes everything feel urgent. Rue wants comfort immediately. She wants stability immediately. She wants reassurance immediately. Jules cannot give that constantly, especially not when she feels drained herself. And each time Rue needs her in a way that feels too heavy, Jules' fear grows stronger. She feels the psychological pull of fusion, the sense that Rue's emotional world is merging with hers, that she is becoming responsible for Rue's moods, actions, and sobriety. That merging terrifies her, because if Rue falls, Jules feels like she will be dragged down too. Eventually, the pressure becomes too much. Jules tries to express her need for autonomy, her need for independence, her need for personal space and emotional breathing room, but Rue cannot fully hear it because she is drowning in her own struggles. And this miscommunication becomes their downfall. Jules is not choosing independence over Rue. She is choosing survival. She is choosing to protect her identity, her mental health, and her emotional stability in a situation where everything feels too heavy. And while some people might judge her for stepping back, those judgments ignore the psychological reality. Jules is someone who needs boundaries to stay safe. Rue's addiction destroys boundaries. Jules is someone who fears being consumed by other people's emotional weight. Rue's dependency deepens that fear. Jules is someone who wants to explore life widely and freely. Rue's addiction narrows life into a small, tight space that suffocates her. In the end, the psychology of Jules Vaughn is a portrait of a young person torn between love and fear, between closeness and independence, between compassion for Rue and self-protection from Rue's addiction. Her fear of being consumed does not mean her feelings were not real. It means her boundaries were. It means she understood something important about relationships, that love cannot survive if one person must disappear to keep the other alive. Jules wanted to love Rue without losing herself. She wanted connection without fusion. She wanted closeness without being swallowed by the darkness she worked so hard to escape. And in that struggle, in that painful push and pull between her heart and her survival instinct, Jules shows us the complicated truth that sometimes the most emotional part of loving someone is knowing when getting too close might break you.